Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is pretty straightforward. We take a complex stack of sources, notes, maybe research, and pull out the core insights you need fast.
And today, we're digging into some really specific material. This is part of a series curated by Dr. Dario Santucci called Os libros que me tornaram como sou, the books that made me who I am.
Right. And the book we're focusing on is Luiz Philippe de Orleans e Bragança, Porque o Brasil é País Atrasado, from 2017.
Why is Brazil a backward country? It's definitely a title designed to grab your attention.
It is. But what's really interesting is his core argument. He pushes back hard against the common explanations for Brazil's problems, blaming the culture, the famous jeitinho, colonial history, even geography.
Exactly. He basically says those are convenient excuses, maybe even narratives that serve a purpose. He argues the real root cause is structural, political. It's about the system itself.
So not inherent flaws in the people or the land, but the rules of the game.
Precisely. He lays out a kind of step-by-step reasoning to define Brazil's current political system, arguing it's actually built not to foster development. Our job today is to unpack that argument, to understand his definition of the structural problem.
Okay, let's dive right in. First hurdle. This idea that blaming culture is wrong. What's his main issue with that popular view?
Well, he sees it as a narrative, often promoted by, let's say, certain intellectual or political circles, that fosters a kind of national low self-esteem.
The "it's all our fault" message.
Yeah, the idea that everything is the fault of culture and society, which conveniently suggests the population is inherently flawed and, needs strong guidance from above, from a centralized elite. He thinks this is a distraction.
That's distraction from the structural issue.
Entirely. He insists the verifiable causes are political structure and ideology, not some vague cultural trait.
Okay, so if it's about structure and institutions, we need clarity. He points out a common confusion in Brazil, right, between state, government, and bureaucracy.
Absolutely critical distinction. People often use the terms interchangeably, but they're very different things with different roles.
Like saying the government when you mean the permanent civil service, or maybe the country itself.
Exactly. So the state, that's the permanent stuff. The institutions defined by the Constitution, like the public universities, the public ministry, the social security system, they endure regardless of elections.
Got it. Then the government.
That's the temporary manager. The elected officials, president, governors, mayors who run the show for a fixed term, they manage the state, ideally.
And the third part of this trinity, the bureaucracy, that seems key.
It really is. The bureaucracy is the whole apparatus of unelected technical staff. The civil service, the administrators who actually apply the rules day to day.
And the danger there is.
The risk, and he stresses this, is that the permanent bureaucracy, the rule appliers, can end up having as much or even more real power than the temporary elected government. They can become the masters, not the servants.
Right. If the managers can't actually manage the machine because the machine has its own momentum or interests.
Precisely. And that institutional imbalance, he argues, is a massive drag on development. Stagnation.
Okay, that setup makes sense. So the state is the enduring framework, government, the temporary pilots, bureaucracy, the engine room. What dictates the overall design of the ship, though? The Constitution.
Yes, and he uses a really effective analogy for the Constitution's role, the aquarium analogy.
The aquarium, how does that work?
It's simple but powerful. A constitution is like an aquarium tank. It sets the limits, the size, the parameters of the political system, the political environment.
So the environment shapes the fish.
Exactly. Take the same human beings, the same species, and put them in a tiny, restrictive, over-regulated tank. Their behavior will be constrained. Move them to a vast, ocean-like environment with clear rules and lots of room for initiative, and their behavior, their collective actions, will change dramatically.
So it's the environment, the constitutional framework that drives collective behavior, not some fixed cultural defect.
That's his core point. And it ties directly to stability, or the lack thereof. He makes a striking comparison.
Between Brazil and the U.S.?
Yeah. Look at the U.S. Constitution. It's been around since 1789, right? Ratified then. Amended only, 17 times since? That's incredible stability.
And Brazil's 1988 Constitution, the Carta Magna.
It was changed over 80 times before it was even 30 years old. Think about that. It's less a foundational document and more like a constantly shifting set of instructions. It screams instability.
Wow, okay. And he links this instability to the nature of the '88 Constitution, right? It's interventionism.
Yes, he really zeroes in on this. It's not just that it changes, but what it tries to do, it's deeply interventionist. And this gets into a subtle but crucial point about how rights are framed.
How so? The wording matters.
Immensely.
Right.
Think about classic liberal constitutions like the U.S. Bill of Rights. They tend to limit the state to protect inherent rights. Congress shall make no law, restricting speech, for instance. The power rests with the individual, and the state is barred from infringing. But the Brazilian Constitution often grants freedoms. It might say something like, expression of intellectual artistic activity is free.
Ah, I see the difference. One says the state can't touch this. The other says the state allows this.
Precisely. And the author sees a huge problem there. The wording implies that the state is the original source of the right, that it grants you the freedom and logically could potentially revoke it.
That feels fundamentally different, almost like the state owns the liberty by default.
That's exactly his critique. He views that as a form of tyranny against natural pre-existing rights, and he points to history. Brazil's longest-lasting constitutions from 1824 and 1891 were the least interventionist, the really detailed prescriptive ones. They got tossed out or heavily amended very quickly.
Okay, so the Constitution creates this restrictive, unstable aquarium. What kind of economy develops inside it? He makes the bold claim that Brazil isn't a capitalist country.
Right, that's a major plank of his argument.
So if it's not capitalist, what label does he use?
He argues Brazil has actually been moving away from real capitalism, which he defines simply as private property, the means of production, and genuinely free exchange for about a century. Instead, he says it operates under oligarchism or maybe a kind of neo-socialism.
Oligarchism. Let's unpack that. This sounds like the heart of his diagnosis. It's not just about some people being richer than others.
No, not just income inequality. Oligarchism, as he describes it, is a system where political elites and economic elites essentially conspire together.
Right.
They work against the rule of law and often against what society actually wants to maintain their own positions.
A kind of closed loop. How does it work in practice?
He describes a mechanism. Large established economic groups, the economic oligarchy, push for complex, restrictive regulations in the domestic market.
Why would they want more regulation?
Because it creates high barriers to entry. It keeps out smaller competitors, new innovators. Think permits, licenses, complex tax rules. Only the big guys can navigate it. And alongside that, they seek subsidized public financing. Think of the big state development bank, BNDES, getting capital on favorable terms unavailable to others.
Okay, so they get protection from competition and cheap money. What do the political elites get out of this arrangement?
Well, funding for political campaigns is a big one. And crucially, the economic oligarchs agree to accept high labor costs and restrictive union rules, which are beneficial to the political oligarchies, often linked to unions.
So it's a trade-off. Big business gets market protection and cheap loans. Politicians get campaign funds and union support. And the little guy, the potential competitor,
Locked out. The system ensures only the established players thrive. It concentrates power and guarantees the status quo.
and that's where it hits the average person, the listener trying to get ahead. He says the real injustice isn't income inequality per se.
Right, it's the inequality of access to opportunities, or capital, in the broader sense, access to the chance for social mobility, for climbing the ladder.
If you're not connected, if you're not part of that oligarchical structure, the path upwards is blocked by design.
Exactly. The state, through this excessive regulation and central planning, limits access to credit, to permits, to market entry. It actively penalizes entrepreneurship from below.
And things like the state-run social security system, he sees that as part of the problem too.
He uses it as an example of unsustainable social engineering within this controlled system. He points out the math is just broken. Brazil used to have something like 9 workers paying in for every 1 retiree drawing benefit.
No.
Now it's closer to 2 to 1. It's mathematically unsustainable. And covering that deficit eats up, I think he says, about 35% of all federal taxes. That's instability caused by a fundamentally flawed structure, not just by social differences. He argues real instability comes when people see no path up.
Okay, a pretty bleak diagnosis of the structure. If the system is engineered this way, favoring an oligarchy, what's the alternative? What's the new vision he proposes?
He's calling for pretty radical change, actually. A fundamental constitutional reform based on classical liberal principles. He looks to models he sees as successful and enduring, like the American founding, or even, interestingly, aspects of the ancient Spartan Republic.
Focused on limiting the state.
Very much so. A state deliberately restricted to its core functions. providing justice, security, and defense. Basically getting out of the way of individual initiative and economic activity.
And he proposes specific structural changes to achieve this, to break that oligarchic grip,
Yes, he outlines three main ones. First is fragmenting executive power,
meaning getting rid of the strong presidential system.
or at least drastically weakening its centralization. He suggests either moving to a parliamentary system or heavily decentralizing the presidency, maybe making state governors more like true heads of government within their states. The key idea is separating the head of state, a nonpartisan figure focused on stability, justice, security, from the head of government who handles the day-to-day politics and administration.
Okay, fragment the top. What's the second big reform?
True federalism, real decentralization. He argues that many powers currently held by the central union government need to be pushed down to the states and even municipalities.
Like what kinds of powers?
Things like labor laws, social security rules, environmental regulations, even aspects of criminal law. The guiding principle should be subsidiarity,
Subsidiary meaning?
meaning a higher level of government like the federal government should only step in if the problem cannot be solved effectively at a lower level, like the state or city. Power should reside at the lowest practical level.
Makes sense. Fragment power, push it down. And the third element?
That the whole new system must be built upon and actively protect what he identifies as Brazil's 5 core sort of natural values.
Which are?
He lists them as the Judeo-Christian tradition, the value of work and prosperity, liberty and free initiative, stability and citizenship, and justice and security. Any constitution, he argues, that tries to define or grant these rather than just protecting them as pre-existing risks becoming tyrannical.
And he connects this ideal back to Brazilian history.
Yeah, he argues that the period from 1824 to 1930, the Empire and the First Republic, which had less interventionist constitutions, was actually Brazil's most stable and prosperous era, with lower taxes and greater respect for property rights.
So summing up his argument, Brazil today isn't really a democratic capitalist federation. It's an oligarchical system using the 88 Constitution's interventionism and excessive regulation as tools to maintain control for political and economic elites. It's engineered stagnation.
That captures the essence of it, yes. It's a structural diagnosis.
Which leads to a pretty powerful closing thought. He uses a historical figure,
Right.
Cincinnatus.
Yes, Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus, a Roman figure, supposedly. The story goes he was called from his farm to be given temporary dictatorial powers to save Rome during a crisis. He did the job, won the victory, and then immediately gave up power and went back to his plow.
A symbol of duty and reluctance for power?
Exactly. The author uses him to reinforce the idea that while virtuous leaders are good, what's fundamentally needed is a system, a structure, that defends liberty and prevents power concentration, rather than relying on finding a perfect hero.
So if we can't wait for Cincinnatus to ride in and fix everything, who is the Cincinnatus for Brazil now?
Well, this is the provocative part. He suggests that until those deep structural changes happen, things like genuine popular sovereignty tools, maybe local district voting, referendums, the right to recall politicians, the answer has to come from within society. The Cincinnatus, he implies, is you. The reader, the citizen, now equipped with this understanding of the system's flaws. The real fight, he concludes, isn't primarily about redistributing wealth. It's about breaking down the barriers, opening the gates, ensuring that opportunity, the chance for social ascension, is genuinely accessible to everyone. Because historical instability, he argues, isn't caused by inequality itself, but by the lack of pathways for people to improve their situation. That's the real challenge.